Welcome to My 70s with me, the Gabby Cabby, on SRB Radio in association with Griffiths Clothing and supporting the Jeff Astle Foundation. Today I'm joined by Joe Gallagher for A Decade in Blue. Joe, how are you?
Fit and healthy, and that's the most important thing that us ex-pros look for now, is that as long as we're fit and healthy and we keep going, especially after the weekend we've just had, the bad news.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good.
I mean, talking of that, and we will, I mean, it's absolutely horrendous, isn't it, what happened with the helicopter, with Leicester, with Glenn that had a heart attack as well. And football seems to, every week, things go on in the football world and the football family, but there's some weekends that tragedy hits, and none more any worse in recent times than what happened at Leicester. It
really was. I wasn't certainly not close to any of the Wolves, any of the Leicester players, and I wasn't close to Glenn Hoddle. Played against him a good few times. Yeah. Played against Leicester many times. But it was a dark day in football on Saturday. The news of the helicopter when it landed on the pitch, and then it took off, and shortly after it came down. Terrible, and the people on board didn't survive. It was a terrible occasion, and then shortly after I heard about Glenn Hoddle. Again, terrible, 61 years of age on his birthday, a heart attack. It's just, and that's why when you said on your opening lines, how are you? As long as we are healthy and we keep battling on, and we're fit and we have our health, that's that's all we ask for.
And again, with players of your age, we're going to talk about that in great length. My 70s, it is your 70s today, Joe. You played on poor pitches, you had cortisone injections, you had things pumped into you when you were injured to get onto the field of play.
Onto the pitch, yeah.
Because you didn't have the squads like that in those that you do today.
That's right. That's right. I had a history of a bad right knee, so I struggled for many years with my right knee. Had lots of cortisone injections, as you say. And then I had back trouble with, I had a bad back for it felt like over a whole season. And there were times when after the game, I just couldn't stoop down to take my boots off. And the physiotherapist, every game for a whole season, used to always take my boots off. Not something that I wanted to do, but I just couldn't bend down. So I used to have these cortisone injections. They done the job to get me through the game. But for the next few days, I really struggled with my back and my right knee, of course. So yes, they were. Yeah, fantastic days, as you say. The 70s was for the guys who you have as visitors on your radio show, who do the 80s, the 90s, and hopefully for the future. But the 70s, people who are listening in, people who remember the 70s, was just a fantastic time for football. Not being biased, that to me it was the best time of football. As I say, not being biased, but worldwide, your Brazils, your Italy, West Germany,
Holland as well.
Holland and France. They were fantastic players, and we see great players nowadays, but it was an abundance of all great teams in the 70s.
Now, I want to give a special mention to Backpass Magazine, which is a retro magazine, and I do believe that you featured in there as well. Also to Donald Shanks, who's running the New York Marathon for Stan Bowles, and for Stan Bowles' former club's fans, they've got an Alzheimer's disease support page as well, which are doing great things. In fact, there's a calendar out for Stan Bowles, and in those 70s, yes, we had the bad pitches. you had great kits as well. You didn't have any advertisements, and you had some wonderful players like Stan. And sadly now, some of those players have got horrible illnesses like Alzheimer's. And anything that we can do to help and to support, and just by mentioning pages and putting shows like we do, and with the Astles as well, put them into groups and connecting with people, it makes a little bit of a difference.
Absolutely. And you talk about Stan Bowles. Yes, the 70s was a time for great players to be on the stage, and Stan, of course, and Rodney Marsh, and Alan Hudson, and Alan Ball. There was lots and lots of fantastic players. Frank Worthington, who we had at Birmingham City for a season or two. They were really good top players. We don't see so many of them now. Why
do you think that is, Joe?
I really don't know. It's the pitches are a lot better nowadays than they used to be. But I really don't know the answer to it. It's just the eras that we have. We had the great Trevor Francis at Birmingham City. As I say, it's not the pitches. We're just very, very lucky. I class myself as being very, very lucky to have played with and against Trevor Francis, and against lots of these other players who we mention. Your Stan Bowles, your Alan Hudsons, great players. It was just I'm honoured to be around in them times and play. Fantastic.
Who was your most, if you were up against whoever, would you think, geez, I need an early night tonight, I'm up at, because again with Hudson and Stan Bowles was in your area of the field, but the likes of Woody and Tony Curry and Borley and that, they was in the middle third. That final third is where them maverick players that could hurt you and put the ball in the net.
Absolutely.
Who was your most feared opponent?
Well, I used to go to bed on a Friday night thinking, who am I having to mark tomorrow? Yeah. In them days, it was the centre half marks the centre forward, the number 9, and I'd lie in bed and I'd think, tomorrow I'm going to be marking Peter Osgood or Mick Shannon or Derek Dugan or John Richards, Paul Mariner, some of the, and I wouldn't believe it, and I would always say to myself, I've got to make sure that I have a good game. I start very well, which is the most important thing for a player, is to start very well. Your first touch has to be very, very good as possible to gives you a bit of confidence to set off, and it sets the standard of the game you're going to play. So it was lots of times you would start the game and you'd make a mistake and you'd think, oh gosh, and it knocks your confidence a little bit, and you have to try and get back onto doing something good, like a good pass or a good header or a good tackle, and that gives you confidence, and that brings you, that helps you through the game.
So let's start when you come to Birmingham, because you're not from Birmingham, you're Liverpudlian. You were, 15?
15, yep. Straight from school, yes.
At New Street Station, from Lime Street. Yeah. What were them early days? That was 1970, wasn't it?
1970, yes. I played, going back a month or two, I received, I played for Liverpool schoolboys, and then we played in the English Trophy final, which is the equivalent of the FA Cup, but it was for schoolboys, and we played at South Liverpool's ground, and we played against East London. We played East London, and it was the English Trophy final. So there was lots of small crowd there in them days, and after the game, the Liverpool scout sort of stopped me as I was leaving the pitch and on the side of the pitch and said, "Would you like to sign for Birmingham?" And I really didn't believe what he was, I really didn't believe it. And I just said, well, yes, of course I would. And there was another boy who played in the same team as myself, and he wanted him to come down to Birmingham. So, so the scout was in touch with my parents and said, we'd like Joe to join Birmingham City Football Club. And my mum and dad said, well, yes, absolutely. And so that was my promise to Birmingham City. And Don Dorman met me at the New Street station, and I had the backside hanging out of my trousers and holes in my shoes. And it was a big adventure for me, leaving 90, 100 miles away from Liverpool. And Don Dorman took me up to St Andrews to meet Freddie Goodwin and the secretary, Alan Instone. And from then, they put me in some digs in Sheldon, and that was me on an apprenticeship for Birmingham City. So I was an apprentice for 2 years, and then signed professional on my 17th birthday. Freddie Goodwin took me up to the office and explained to me about signing these forms and things. So I signed professional. I signed apprentice, and then I signed professional on my 17th birthday. And it was just such a relief and such a fantastic stepping stone in my career to sign professional. And there I was in my programme of another 2 years to make it into the first team.
Because that youth team that you got brought up in, that was a damn good youth team as well, wasn't it? So
fantastic.
And also, how important was the reserve game as well? Because you got your youth team, you got your reserve, and then you got your first team. And I'm guessing that kids that are showing a bit of promise would then go and play reserve team football, and then you get your stripes and you go up to the first team as well.
If you were lucky enough, yes. If you played well enough in the reserve team games, if you dedicated your training days, and the manager likes the look of you, he thinks you could go to that little stepping stone to step up. So yes, as you say, from the youth team, we did have an excellent youth team. At the top of the list was Trevor Francis, of course. Kenny Burns was there. Stephen Phillips, the small little striker. There was a chappie at the back called Bobby Good from London. Great player. Bobby Fryer from Manchester. Paul Cooper joined shortly after.
Broyley Hill, wasn't he?
Shortly after we'd got an established youth team. Paul Cooper joined the ranks, and he was an excellent goalkeeper. So it's from there. Then you're lucky enough, hopefully, that you can get yourself into the reserve team, and then from the reserve team into the first team. I did have a few games for the reserves. I can't remember being in the reserves very long, but there was one game I do remember playing. I had to mark Harry Redknapp. Harry Redknapp had to play. I was playing left back for Birmingham City youth team, and Harry Redknapp was playing outside right for West Ham, and we played in this cup game, and Harry Redknapp played. So good days, fantastic days. And
then your promotion to the first team. Your debut, who was that again?
Yeah, my debut was, my first game for Birmingham City was on a Wednesday evening. It was a midweek game. It was up at Stoke at the Victoria Ground. And I can't really remember the result, but I must have played well, because on the following Saturday, 3 or 4 days later, Freddie Goodwin picked me then to play in the first team at Highbury against the mighty Arsenal. So what a stepping stone that was to make my league debut in the first team against Arsenal, against big, strong, tough, good players, your likes of Frank McClintock. Pat Rice was the right back. Bob McNabb was the left back. And just before the end of that game, Liam Brady, the great Arsenal player, came on as substitute. That was his debut as well for Arsenal. So great times, great days. When I think of them days, and we talk about losing our memory as time goes by. I can remember them days.
Yeah.
Them days are easy to recall because the names roll off your tongue. But what I had for my dinner yesterday, I haven't got a clue.
And I'm guessing, did Arsenal have you for breakfast that day? Because that was a baptism of fire.
Was,
and John Radford and Ray Kennedy would have been in that
and
team
Ray
as well,
Kennedy. I had to mark them two guys. They
what
were
was
up
that
front.
like?
It was horrendous.
Yeah.
It was a hard game. I was so nervous, knowing that I was going to play against the great John Radford at the time, and Ray Kennedy, two big strong lads, and it was the tone of they could easily knock me out the way because I was inexperienced, just coming into the game, learning the trade, but Birmingham, I think we lost the game fairly heavily, maybe 3. I really can't remember the score, but I know it was we took a hammering. But to me, it was just making my debut in the first team against these players, and from then I played in most games after that for the first team. So I have Freddie Goodwin to thank for having faith in me. And then that was my time then to be playing against the likes of your Alan Balls and your Mick Shannons and Peter Osgoods and Ian Hutchinson, who played for Chelsea, Clyde Best, who played at West Ham. Great times.
And of course, Jimmy Greaves would have still been around, wouldn't he?
Jimmy,
probably playing for West Ham in them days, wouldn't he?
Possibly. I think Jimmy did he eventually end up at Coventry? Jimmy Greaves?
Don't think so. No, I think he pretty much stayed in London.
I don't remember playing against Jimmy Greaves. I'm sure I would have remembered it. I do remember playing against when I was in the youth team. Playing for Birmingham City youth team, we played over at West Bromwich Albion's training ground, and in their youth team was selected because of injury he'd just sustained was Jeff Astle.
Oh, right,
and so I was after the game I can't remember the result, as I say, we came home, and then from my digs when we got home maybe 6-7 o'clock in the evening, because it was away at West Brom, I immediately went straight up to the phone box to phone my dad and say, "Dad, guess who I've played against today? Jeff Astle." And my dad just couldn't believe it, and it was fantastic times. It was again
memories. You know, the Albion fans to the Baggies, well, the Throssels as they were now. Times changed. They're the Baggies now. They're the Throssels. Jeff Astle was the king.
Absolutely, yes. Well, he just played in the World Cup for England in 1970 in Mexico. So and England at that time, they did have quite a good run. I think they got to about the quarterfinals.
Yeah, we did. We messed it up when Sir Alf he took off Bobby Charlton and Martin Peters and made a couple of changes, and we were 2-0 up and we got beat 3-2. That was it then. And there is an argument that England were better in 1970 than what they were in 1966. And when you're looking at the national team and all the great players that we had in those days, it's unbelievable to think that we didn't even qualify for a World Cup in the 70s.
Well, that's
mad.
That's when that was the time when I was sort of breaking into the first team, as we say, and my chances of playing for the England under 23s they just were at the time. But England didn't qualify for certain things. There's many years where England just weren't at the World Cup, or they weren't at the European Championships, or something. Great players, the 70s. Keith Newton, the goalkeeper, Gordon Banks. Peter Bonetti, another fantastic goalkeeper.
Brian LeBone, a player that played in your position.
Brian LeBone, Roger Hunt, Ian Callaghan was in the squad. Great times.
Now, talking of Roger Hunt, he is the inspiration of your goal scoring
He
celebrations.
was, absolutely. I have told you that story before, yes. Well, brought up in Liverpool and brought up on the Cop for several years. Used to stand there with my brother and watch Liverpool play. And Roger Hunt was a fantastic football player. It was at the time I must have been sort of 10, 12, 13, so I didn't really appreciate the ins and outs of football. But what I did see from where we was in the Cop was whenever Roger Hunt scored, which was very, very often. his goal celebration, and I used to just watch in awe and in a dream world of watching him running after he'd scored the goal, running, jumping, pumping it into the air. It was fantastic. And I used to think to myself, if ever I'm a football player and I score a goal, that's how I'm going to celebrate. And as I grew up and got into the teams and being a defender, chances of scoring goals were fairly less, but whenever, so as you mentioned, the 1975 semi-final, when I did score the goal for Birmingham City, without a doubt, as soon as that ball went over the line, I thought straight away of Roger Hunt, and I said, right, I'm off now, and I just run and jumped and punched the air, and it was I was celebrating the celebration of Roger Hunt. I just wanted people to know that what I was doing, it's Roger's move. That's what Roger used to do, and I was so happy. I could have jumped over the stand to get Birmingham City, a goal in the semi-final of the FA Cup. But in my heart, I was just wanted to do the Roger Hunt celebration.
Now we got to two semi-finals in the 70s.
Yeah.
72-1. Yes. You didn't play in.
No, I was in the stands for that game. Roger Hind
and Stan Harland. Played alongside him.
Stan was a lovely, lovely man, as Roger was. Roger was a lovely, lovely man. Two great fellas, and they were two great fellas that for me to follow into the first team. Every home game when Birmingham City played at home, Stan Harland would play. I would be sitting in the stands as an apprentice, because we would have played on the Saturday morning at Elmdon or in a reserve team game. But when I would watch the game at St Andrews, Stan Harland used to take me home, because I knew Stan was always going back to Liverpool after the game, and we'd spoke about it very, very often, and Stan would always take me up and drop me off outside my mum's house. So I'm just so grateful of the help that Stan gave me in them days, to take me from Birmingham to Liverpool after every game was just I would just, he was such a wonderful man, and he wanted to help me. He wanted to do that. He knew what I was going through as an apprentice into the reserve team, so he knew what it was all about, and it was he was I was just so privileged to do that.
Now that team in the 70s that you were in, it would have been in goal Dave Latchford.
Dave Latchford in goal, Ray Martin right back.
Yes, it would be. Gary
Pendry left back. And then was normally Roger Hind was the centre back, and Roger, if you remember, a player who played next to him called Dave Robinson.
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
Sugar Robinson, lovely man. Eventually went to Walsall. So that was like the back four. And then the midfield, on the right-hand side, we'd have Alan, the great Alan Campbell. Alan was a fantastic football player. Alan Campbell, in the centre of midfield, would be somebody like Malcolm Page, because Malcolm Page could and would either play as a centre-back one of the fullbacks or in midfield. But Malcolm in midfield. On the left-hand side, shortly after maybe 1971, Gordon Taylor came then. Yeah, so Gordon was a big player in the early 70s for Birmingham City, and up front we have the great three, don't we? Trevor Francis, Bob Latchford, and Bob Hatton. So again, we think of the strike forces now. We watch the Premier games on and I can't see any team that has a front three as potent and as free living and goal scoring as much as Latchford, Hatton, Francis. It was a great.
Because again, we look at it and they were ours. And for you guys to play behind them three was phenomenal. I would probably put them just behind Best, Law and Charlton.
Absolutely.
I think those three that we had were phenomenal.
Were the only three, are the only three you've mentioned that you would put them behind.
They were that good, Francis Hatton and Latchford.
They were. Trevor was, I speak volumes all the time about Trevor. He was class at everything. His passing was brilliant. His work rate was fantastic. His goal scoring was second to none. He was a teammate, and he would also come back and help the defence and so on and so forth. And Bob Latchford, goal after goal after goal. And Bob Hatton, he was the so-called unsung hero of the front three. The front two, Trevor and Bob Latchford, they get the goals and they get a lot of the publicity. But Bob done a lot of the groundwork for them. I'm sure them two guys, Trevor and Bob Latchford, would thank Bob Hatton very, very much for the work rate he'd done. I don't think them two would have been as quite successful if Bob hadn't have been around making the goals for them and so on. And even in his own right, Bob was a great goal scorer. And it's only a few years ago where I watched some tapes and watched some of the goals that Bob scored, and they were absolute. And I just couldn't. I watched them nowadays, and I just couldn't believe how fantastic they were. He really, really was underrated, Bob. I know he came to Birmingham maybe on the latter stages of his time, but he was one hell of a striker.
Now, your partner at centre half, we remember all the formations that Birmingham played, and pretty much up till 1974 when Bob was sold to Everton, Howard come in and Archie Styles. We knew 1 to 11 who they were, but your partner seemed to change quite a bit, didn't he?
Very often, yes. Yeah. Most people say to me, who's the best partner you ever partnered at the back? And, I really and honestly can't pick one player. I think the standout person right now, as we sit here now, I've finished playing the game many years ago. Colin Todd was a fantastic football player. Again, Colin came in the latter part of his career, but he was still a quality act. He was still a great player. But we talk about, I took over from Roger Hind, Freddie Goodwin, in Fred's thoughts, which were absolutely correct, that I could learn off Roger Hind. So what Fred done, when we'd stop at a hotel the night before a game, he'd have me room with Roger to learn his professionalism. He was so good. He was on time for everything. His dress code was impeccable. He wouldn't allow any of the other pros to sort of step out of line. He was like our teacher. He would come up and he would pinch the side of, when somebody would pinch the side of somebody, as if to say they've got too much fat on their body. And he was forever grabbing hold of Kenny Burns and squeezing Kenny. And Kenny was quite lean at the time. We look at Ken now, and I hope Ken doesn't mind me saying he's changed a little bit now since he was playing. But Roger would come round to us many times, and he would squeeze the fat on our side as if to say, "You've got too much fat on you. Get yourself into shape," and so on. But so I had many partners, and Roger was my first partner, and he taught me a lot about the game. He taught me a lot about being a defender, being in defence, positional play, and so on and so forth. And of course there was Malcolm Page. Malcolm was a great player, because Malcolm got about, was it 23 or 24 caps for Wales? And as I say, Malcolm could play right back, left back, centre back, midfield. Malcolm could play anywhere really. Was very good. And then of course we forget the players like the likes of John Roberts, who came from Arsenal. And John was a big, strong, never say die type of character, a lovely man, worked very hard, was hard in the tackle, and knew the game inside out. Again, very strong. He had a great left foot, and he would run through a brick wall, as many players I've seen. Same type of attitude to him. So John Roberts was an excellent centre-back.
Pat Howard was another one we had when we bought him from Newcastle.
Pat Howard came from Newcastle. We played against Newcastle very often. There was one season we went through where we played Newcastle about 6 times in one season.
1972.
Possibly, yes. And I remember going up on the train with the team, and it was a time. There was also a time when the electricity was on shore.
Yeah, the miners,
and
miners are on strike.
So they couldn't use any floodlights and things like that. So Pat Howard came in them days to Birmingham City, and again he was a great character to copy from, to watch and learn, like Roger Hine was, like Malcolm was, like Kenny Burns was, because Ken, as we know, great goal scorer, played in midfield for Scotland, but he could also play at the back next to myself, and he was very strong, good tackler. So I played with lots of players. So when somebody, getting back to your first question, Gabby, I played with lots of centre backs at the back. I learned from them all, and they were all excellent players.
How many times did you wince when you seen Kenneth going in for a challenge?
Many times. Well, possibly every time, because although he was a great player and a great timing of tackle, there was sometimes he would make, very much like myself, make reckless tackles, which would spoil it for him, spoil it for the rest of the team. We'd have a free kick against us, he would get booked or so on. So there was many times where I think I'm a bit more, shall we say, not as fierce as
cultured.
Ken didn't care how he got that ball. He would get that ball off that player, whatever it took, even if you had to get the police back in. He would get the he would get the ball. But sometimes you have to. I mean, the players we have nowadays. And I mentioned a player a few minutes ago, Colin Todd, was an impeccable tackler. He could time everything, not just so much his tackles, but his headers up in the air, his runs, and he could read the game so superbly well. And again, I learned such a lot from Colin Todd. But it was just all great times in the days where there was great players about, not just at Birmingham but at all the other football clubs. Your not very teams like your Southampton, your
unfashionable
Ipswich,
sides.
unfashionable was the word I was looking
City,
for.
Derby County, really, to be fair, before Clough.
Yes, your Southamptons, your Ipswiches, they all had great play. Paul Mariner, Mick Shannon, we mentioned earlier. Stoke City had John Ritchie, striker, centre forward.
They're top goal scorers to this day now.
And Jeff Hurst.
Yeah.
So it was top players.
I mean, again, Joe, in them days, them mid-70s, Stoke City for 2 seasons come 5th. And that second season, I think they were just 5 points off winning the First Division Championship and had beaten Derby County in 1975 at the baseball ground. Jimmy Greenough, another player that come in at Brummagem and just left by the time you got there.
Mike Pedgick, the left back. Yeah. What a hard player he was, And of course, Gordon Banks played in goal. I think that might have been a tad just before my times. I think he may have moved on to another football club.
Well, he had the car crash, didn't he, Gordon?
Yes.
And lost the in his one eye, and that pretty much finished him.
Possibly, yes.
But Leicester City, another team back in them days. Frank was there.
Keith Weller, Frank Worthington.
I mean, how good was Keith Weller? I mean, Keith Weller was at Chelsea with Uddy.
Yes.
But they bought him in from Millwall.
Absolutely.
And I says to Al, because he scored loads of goals. But he says Dave told him to track back. And like I think Uddy said he scored something like 10 goals in about the first 12 games. He said we were just happy at Chelsea for him to carry on and do it. But then, one day, all of a sudden, Keith Weller wasn't there and he went to Leicester. But there was a connection there with Jimmy Bloomfield as well and Dave Sexton.
Right,
Because there's all Dave connections all the time in football, isn't there?
They are, yes. And it's all era, it's all the time of era and the great football in them days, the hard tackling in them days and the tackling nowadays and the referees and things. But Ipswich Town, we talk about, I've mentioned Paul Mariner once or twice, only because he was the centre forward that I was up against. But the likes of Kevin Beattie, who passed away just recently,
player, wasn't he?
Was a fantastic player. And I was at the England youth squad with him in the early days in Lillishall. John Walk, great player. One or two other players that just slipped my mind at the moment. But great
got there
players.
In that great team, Alan Brazil. You got
Alan
Eric
Brazil,
Gates,
the big tall centre back,
Terry Butcher,
Hunter.
Alan Hunter.
Alan Hunter, yes, yeah.
And then you got Russell Osman that had come through as well. You got Mickey Mills there.
Mick Mills,
But this is it. Back in the 70s. As a fan, you could remember almost every player from every team.
Yes,
Alan Birchinall, what a character he was, Warnie Birch. Played at Chelsea.
That's right.
I think there's a great story. I'd love to interview Birch. I think there's a great story on why Birch left Chelsea and went to Leicester. But again, one thing that you didn't get off Kenny Burns, though, he was the bookie, wasn't he?
Ken
you didn't get no dough back from Ken,
no,
did you?
No. If ever the lads used to have a little bet with Ken, 20 pence, 50 pence in the hotel before we left for games or on the coach and things like that. But it got to a stage where Ken wouldn't pay out, and we was looking at each other, and we was saying, well, Ken, me horse has won, or me football team has won, or so on and so on. But Ken just, I don't know what it was. He just didn't pay out, and so the lads had a little bit of a meeting and says, right, we need a new bookie. Who should we pick? Who should we have as a bookie? And I thought to myself, and I was just a young boy getting into the side, and I thought, I don't mind doing this because of going back to when I was in the back streets of Liverpool, my dad going to the betting shop, and I would stand outside waiting for him and things like that. It was either wait outside the betting shop for my dad or wait outside the pub for my dad, one or the other. And then so one of the lads said to me, Joe, will you take the book? I said, yeah, of course I will. I'll take the book. And some of the lads said, oh, Joe, well, it might be a bit too much for you, because I was just a young boy into the first year. But yes, and on my first day of taking the bets, I'll tell you this story very, very quickly. John Connolly, yeah,
The
remember
winger to
John?
watch.
Yeah, John
yeah.
Connolly and John came with
Gary Jones.
Gary Jones,
Both from
the
Everton.
great Gary Jones. Yeah. So I took these bets, and we're on our way down to Highbury. And and he had this bet where there was 3. I mean, for the listeners, 3 bet the treble. So John picked these 3 horses, which I took off him a few shilling. So we watched the first race of one of the 3 that he'd picked. The first one, we'd watched it win at the hotel. So then and I thought, oh no, this is the first one, so I've got to watch, I've got to make sure or hope the second one doesn't win, and then the third one doesn't win. So we left the hotel, we're on the bus, and then as we're on the bus, the horse racing was on the radio, and it was one of the races where so the first race was probably maybe 1:15, 1:30, and then we've left the hotel, we've gone. So then maybe the 1:45 race was on, and John Connolly's horse was in the race that we were listening to on the coach going to the Highbury Stadium. And of course, I should have been thinking, concentrate on the game, watch the game. But no, I was just listening to this horse race. And damn it, his second horse won, and I thought, oh no, this is not very good. So we've got to Highbury Stadium, we've gone to the dressing room, we're all getting changed. Now, Howard Kendall didn't play on that game. Howard was injured. And he came down in the car with his solicitor. Was his friend? He was his friend. He was my friend as well. Yeah. But by trade he was a solicitor. So he's come down with. So we're in the dressing room. We're getting ready to go out to play against the mighty Arsenal. And all that's on my mind is this third horse. Whether this third horse would win. And I remember the name of the third horse. The horse was called You Be Dizzy. All one word, You Be Dizzy, it was called. And I'll never forget the name of that horse. So we're in the dressing room. It gets to 3:15, and then the door opens. The door opens at the dressing room. And Howard Kendall pokes his head in and to say, all the best, lads, best of luck, have a good game, mighty Arsenal, have a good game, all the best. John Connolly lifts his head up from tying his bootlaces and he says, Howie, what won the 2:30? What won the 2:30 at Haydock? And Howie says, You Be Dizzy, 25-1. And I thought, oh God, absolute disaster. So needless to say, we went out there onto the pitch. I had an absolute nightmare. Most of the players had an absolute nightmare. We lost 4-0. So that was my introduction to being my first day of being a bookmaker.
Derby games, memories of derby games in the 70s, because Birmingham City and Aston Villa, very close, wasn't they?
Yes.
You had the youth team game with Trevor and Brian, wasn't it, head to head? And then we had, in the 70s, they were just really coming back up, and Birmingham were top dogs in the city without any fear of doubt, wasn't they?
I played against Aston Villa about 9 times, and I can remember winning certainly most of them. Won maybe 5, drawn 2, lost 2, a record something like that. So we always were the top dogs against Aston Villa in the 70s when I was playing. Yes, it's like being brought up on the Liverpool and Everton derbies. They're all tasty matches. They're all hard games, very physical. Normally there's a good few goals. But they were excellent to play against the likes of Andy Gray and Brian Little, and in the earlier days Chris Nicholl at the back there, and John Gidman, the right back. Tough games. The early days again, as I say, Brian Little. They also had Alan Little, who his brother used to play in midfield. Yeah, so they were always tough games, certainly over at Aston Villa. They were hard games. But I do remember going over there and we won one of the games. I do remember was winning 2-1 against Aston Villa. But always hard games against Aston Villa. And even through the 90s and nowadays, they're tough games.
The rivalry will always
be there.
But do you remember Kenny's goal celebration in front of the Holt end?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I really don't.
He pretty much just stuck his 2 hands up there in front of the Holt. I used to have it in the reception of my old house, the picture of Burnsy scoring the goal, and you can imagine the cameraman as he's caught it with all the gesticulation of the Holt end towards Burnsy, but Burnsy won't phased. Burnsy didn't care,
not at all. He doesn't care. Ken doesn't care what people say about him or how he reacts. Ken will do his own thing all the time, whether you like it or not. Ken will do it or say it and do it. He's very, very open. I loved Kenny Byrne. Ken was a fantastic football player, but putting the football player to one side, he was a great guy. Once you got to know him, he was a really, really nice guy. Very abrupt, very hard, very cutting, very cutting. You know, if you had a little flaw in you, Ken would find it. Ken would find it out. But we got off to we didn't get off to a fantastic start, Ken and I. It was a few months after I'd joined. I was only at the football club in my first few months, and then as apprentices we'd get all the kit together, and then we'd get it onto the little minibus to go up to Elmdon. Fill the skips up with the boots and the towels and the kits and that, and I was sitting at the front of the not the front seat, but I was sitting just behind the driver type thing, and Ken was even a bit further back, and I didn't know most of the players at the time. I knew the guys, but I'd only been there a few months, and Ken was just a little bit further back, and Ken was reading a paper, and Ken and I should really have known better. Ken read a little clipping out of one of the games the Saturday before, and it was of the Glasgow Rangers game, and he mentioned a player. His name escapes me right now. John Gregg. It was John Gregg. Oh yeah, the great legend of Rangers. Yeah. And I should have known because Ken spent a season or two at the and John and Ken pronounced his name. Ken said it was John. Sorry, John. He said John Gregg, and I said. And I said, without turning round to him, I said, it's Craig. Yeah. And he said, no, it's Greg, John Gregg. Yeah. I went, John Craig. And he went, it's John Gregg. I said, it's Craig. And then with that, I felt this fist going in the back of my neck. Ken just leaned forward over the seat behind me, and he just punched me right in the back of the neck. And I obviously turned round, and then we're trying to grab hold of each other, and we're trying to have fisticuffs in the coach, and the other lads have sort of stopped it. So we got off to a bad sort of start. But Ken was a great player, great, lovely guy, he knew the game inside out. He knew what was right and what was wrong on a pitch. Yeah. So all these clumsy tackles he would make, I don't say he didn't. I think he meant them. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he went on to play to get about 22 caps for Scotland. So great guy, Ken.
He also used to like to play against Leicester. He scored a couple of hat-tricks against Leicester, and it all kicked off on tour as well, didn't it? Game of Pool, Gary Jones, Ken Burns.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the kicking off in Holland first, and then we'll talk about Leicester.
We're over in Belgium or Holland. I think it might have been Belgium, and we're in this little bar, very small bar, all the team. So there was myself, Trevor, Malcolm Page, Gary Pendry, Peter Wyth, John Connolly, Gary Jones, Tony Want. So we're all there. So I'm sitting up. So there was a small pool table in the middle of this small bar, small pool table. Normal size pool table. Some of the lads were sitting across the bar, sitting at the bar with their back to the pool table. Me, Tony Want, and Jimmy Calderwood, we were just sitting at the side, watching Ken and Gary Jones playing pool. And there was a group of local people there, and they looked a little bit rough, shall I say. Looked a little bit rough. So we're just watching this pool game. Me, Tony wants very, very quiet. Trevor, very, very quiet. We're just watching this. And Gary Jones is trying to take a pool shot. And there was, because the place was so small, somebody was in his arm way to bring the cue back. So instead of what I would have done was tap the lady on the shoulder and say, "Excuse me, can I just get a bit of room for this shot?" But no, and I think most people else would have done that, but not Gary Jones. Gary Jones just tweaked her backside, and the lady jumped. So as Gary sort of to say, "Can you get out of my way? I want to take a shot." So we seen it all happen right in front of us. And then we sort of I looked further across to the bunch of guys who knew this lady or were partners with this lady. I really don't know. And they were giving sort of Gary Jones this dirty looks, as they would say. And I thought something's going to happen. So I jumped up and I seen these two guys walk towards Gary Jones. And I stood up and I went and stood in front of Gary and I put both my hands up and I said to these two guys, no, I said, "It's okay." I said, "We're English." I said, he apologises, he's sorry and all things like that. And this chappie's, whatever he was saying, he was pointing at Gary over my shoulder and saying, and I'm saying, and I turned to say to Gary over my shoulder, "You'd better get out of here. Get out now." And as I've turned round to face this guy, the chappie behind him punched me right in the face, and boy did it hurt. So with that, as I was falling down, I grabbed hold of the guy who was in front of me. I grabbed hold of his shirt collars and I pulled him down with me. So me and this guy are on the floor rolling over, trying to. And I'm thinking to myself, I've got to get out of this because I'm going to get killed. I'm going to get killed rolling on this floor. And all I seen was lads were jumping over me, running out the door, all getting out. All the lads from the bar, they all scarpered, all jumping over me. All the lads who were up the side, they were all jumping over me. And we rolled out the door physically because I'm hitting him, he's hitting me. And we are now out of the door. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to get killed here. I've got to get away from this. So I literally sort of tried to push myself away from this guy. And I just started running, and in front of me was the other lads were all running. I just seen all their backsides. And then from the left-hand side, I seen a guy approaching from my left-hand side, coming across. And he took a swing at Peter Peter, and he's caught Peter as Peter's running away to get that way. This guy's come across side on, and he swung at Peter. Peter's done a somersault and landed on the ground, and he eventually, I think he broke his ankle doing that. And then we just scarpered away. We all managed to get back to the hotel, and but it sort of didn't end there. Next morning, we came downstairs, down to reception. Sir Alf Ramsey, Willie Bell, George Dalton, I don't know whether it was George Dalton, might have been the physiotherapist, Jim Williams, might have been Jim Williams. They're all sitting with these, and what I thought were possibly gypsies, or if that's not rude to say, but they travellers. They were all sitting with these. Sir Alf Ramsey, Willie Bell was sitting with these travellers, and I recognised one or two of them from the night before, and it was the group of people who I'd had this brawl with in this bar. So I really can't remember the punishment we got, but Sir Alf Ramsey certainly told us off, and it's something that
I'm guessing Alf wasn't particularly very happy.
Not at all. No. We were all tails between our legs and very naughty boy sort of thing. Yeah.
Now Kenny, he scored, I think, hat-trick definitely against Mark Wallington away at Leicester.
I just remember Ken.
I think he was in goal when we beat them 6-2, and he also scored a hat-trick against Peter Shilton away at Filbert Street.
Right, yes. Whether he was better at centre-back, midfield or centre-forward, to score 3 goals twice against the world's best keeper at the time.
Well, I think one was Shilton, and the other time it was Wallington. I don't think it was Shilton twice. But the second time, he got a TR7. Oh, you guys should have got the TR7.
Yeah, well, we did, yes. How do you chop up a TR7? So the little story behind that, it was a very icy cold day. We inspected the pitch. The lads wore what do we just call them,
rubber
flats?
Trainers.
They were just like trainers this time, because of the surface really wouldn't take a stud or anything like that. And I know at the time that Leicester wanted the game cancelled because they had all these quality players who had played good football. Your Keith Wellers, the midfield players.
John Samuels would have probably played in that team as well.
And Frank Worthington, who were tiptoe. They wanted a good surface, you see. So they wanted it cancelled. We wanted it on, or our manager wanted it on, and the referee deemed it was playable. So we played the game, and they actually they were slipping all over the place, and Birmingham City, we wore the correct footwear, and we were playing very, very well. And a couple of weeks before, maybe a month or 6 weeks before, one of the businessmen in Birmingham had put up for a brand new TR7, which was the top card at the time, and he said the Birmingham City player who scores the 6th goal can have this car. So we had a little meeting the night before, thinking Dave Latchford in goal, or whoever was the goalkeeper, wouldn't be able to score a goal. So we planned that we'll share whatever the monies, whatever the value of it came to, we'll have. And so we've started the game, played the game, and the 5th goal was an own goal. Dennis Rofe scored in his own goal, a header. He meant to head it clear, and he headed it into his goal. And then the 6th goal, shortly after, Ken scored. So we got this car, and after a week or two, it was obviously sold, and the lads shared it out.
Now, didn't Gary Emanuel score in that game as well?
Gary did score against Leicester, yes. I don't really know which game it was, because of playing there. Yeah, possibly.
You played the yellow kit that
yes,
day,
we did.
You?
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Because also as well, we're going to move on to a little bit later, when you left Birmingham.
Yeah.
Because you didn't want to go.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of people that thought, Joe Gallagher wanted to leave.
Yeah.
Football doesn't happen like that.
No.
You're a saleable commodity, sadly. Yeah. When the manager wants you to move out, or the owners want you to move out, like you're gone, aren't you?
That's it, and
what do you do about that? And then also as well, I know it was not the 70s, but the 80s. I do want to briefly talk about your brief time at Wolverhampton Wanderers and Cameragate. Because that was an amazing time, wasn't it?
The camera gate.
When you got sacked.
Oh, right, yes. Yeah.
But also, was it at Leicester, Filbert Street, that your car got trashed?
Was that was at St Andrews.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was.
It was around the time that you were going to leave, wasn't it?
Yes.
Didn't they trash your car?
Yeah, well, it wasn't. Yeah, well, it was. The window was smashed. The back passenger side, possibly, or the passenger side was smashed in, and there was little bricks and things inside the car. So it wasn't sort of taken away. I just had to clean it all out, which is something you don't really want to be doing when you get back late at night from a game,
especially with your own fans.
That's it. Yeah. Yes, it was. I don't really know why all that happened. I honestly don't know whether they've mistaken my car for somebody else.
Possibly.
Hopefully, I really don't know.
You were in it at the time, Joe.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't in the car when it got. But yeah, so I really don't know why and why that happened. I really don't. I think Sir Alf Ramsey might have been the manager at the time, because I remember going back possibly to the coach. Sir Alf Ramsey was still on the coach. And I said my car's been smashed into.
Just quickly, it was Gary Manuel.
I thought it was.
Yes, first goal, wasn't it?
I can't remember in what order the goals were scored, but I do remember Gary Emanuel scoring some kind of spectacular goal on an icy pitch at Leicester.
Yeah.
Australia, you also played Australia, didn't you? In the was that an England B game? Was that you?
That was the England cap. Yes, I only have the one cap, and it was an England B cap.
Yeah,
and it was played at St Andrews against Australia. Yeah, and I received a phone call possibly the night before. Russell Osman had taken ill, or something, or he was pulled out of the B squad to play in the first team England squad. So for whatever reason it was, I think it was something to do with Russell Osman being ill or something, and so they called me up because it was at St Andrews. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, it was to be picked for your country, although it be England B cap. It was the England B. I'm so it's my prized possession. I was so happy to represent England, and being at St Andrews as well was brilliant.
There was also in the 70s, 74, early 75 perhaps, a game for the Birmingham pub bombings. There was a Midland Select 11 versus an England 11. Do you remember that game? Have you any memories of that?
No,
Huddy definitely played for England.
No. I never played in a side with Alan Hudson in.
No, I think Huddy played for the England team, but it was a Midlands 11. I'm sure John Richards played, and Trevor would have played.
Maybe.
And I do remember as a kid, because I was about 9 or 10 maybe in them days, but I do remember the game, but I don't remember an awful lot about the game. I certainly remember Alan Dodd that played for Stoke. He played as well.
Centre back.
It was one of them that a select 11 from England and a select 11 from the Midlands. I think it certainly was a one-off game at St Andrews. What was your most memorable game at St Andrews that you played?
The most memorable game at St Andrews was against Liverpool. With the game I scored in, and my mum and dad were down from Liverpool. So I brought my mum and dad down, and we against Liverpool. So that week we go through the routines of the free kicks and things like that, and we tried this routine up at Elmdon where Howard would run and clip the ball up to me at the back post, so aiming towards where the clock was in the corner. So Archie Styles would run and jump over the ball, and then Howard would run and clip this ball up for me, who would be at the back post running. And so we tried it several times in training, and it didn't work out very well. The keeper would save it, or it was a bad, or it's too high, or I'd head it over, or whatever. So during this game, I brought my mum and dad down from Liverpool, and I remember the tickets. I remember I know where they were sitting upstairs in the stand. It was at the railway end, opposite the in line with the edge of the box, the 18-yard box. So I knew roughly where they were sitting. And my mum had a red scarf on, so there's all these blue scarves, and my mum had a red scarf on. And so during the game, I really don't know what minute it was. I think it was possibly the second goal. So we won the game 2-1. We beat Liverpool 2-1. And I think Trevor got the first goal for Birmingham. Anyway, so we got this free kick in and around about the place, which was my time to go forward, get positioned at the back post. And so during training, this free kick would never work for us. So we have this. We got this free kick. Howard's on the ball. Archie Styles is on the ball. Archie runs, jumps over it. Howard comes in and he clipped this fantastic ball up to me, and I run, jumped and headed it, and I caught it spot on, absolutely spot on, and it went into the far corner. Ray Clements stretched right across the edge, right across his goal line. Just got some tiny fingertips on it, but it did go into the top corner. And I just carried on running towards my mum and dad, because I could see my mum. Birmingham City supporters were all sat down. My mum was standing up with my dad, clapping and cheering and waving this red flag, red scarf she was wearing. So that was a great game. So that's the and it was after that game I took my mum and dad home. Then we went up to the club, the top of the street, and in the newspaper, the Liverpool Echo, it was headlines saying in bold, big bold, Gallagher strikes or something to stop Liverpool winning the game. So I was very proud. My mum and dad were very proud, although they were big Liverpool supporters. But that's the most memorable game I've had. Played against Liverpool, again, 7 or 8, 9 times, up at Anfield and down here in Birmingham. Great team.
Now, there was 2 games in the 70s that I remember as a kid that we played at Anfield. The one where, did Bob Hatton have a goal disallowed and they went down and beat us 4-3?
I remember
and the other one when we won 3-2.
I remember
at Anfield.
I remember the 4-3 game. That might have been the season before. I didn't play in that game. It might have been before. That might have been. Bobby Hope probably played in that game with Tony Want. So that might have been 72, possibly.
Yeah, I've got an idea. 73 is in the head with that one that we lost. That we lost 4-3.
Right. Yeah.
But then it was
shortly after
a game.
Yeah.
And I've got an idea. We took a 3-0 lead and we got beat. We won 3-2.
Yeah, up at Anfield. Well, to go to Anfield in them days was, and it's getting close to it now. It's getting close to it now. Going to Anfield was very, very hard. It was a fortress. It was everything was against you. Obviously, the team were very, very strong. The supporters were very vibrant, very, very, very noisy. Everything was against you playing. You just had to do your very, very best. So we've started this game. I don't remember any incidents at all, but I remember Emlyn Hughes playing and Phil Thompson playing. So Birmingham have gone 1 up. So 1 up at Anfield is a big, big step. So we're playing, and then we go 2 goals up at Anfield. I don't know when half time was or whatever, but and then we went 3 goals up. Well, this is like we're looking at each other thinking, is this right? Is this really right? Is this really right? And it was, well, I don't know. I don't think panic set in us because we were 3 up. We were 3 up. Wherever you're playing, if you're 3 up, you should win the game. And we stopped playing for some reason. We just stopped. Our legs must have gone to jelly. We just stopped playing, and Liverpool pulled it back to 3-2, and then we have just about managed to hang on. But when we went 3 up, it was like what do we do now? What do we do? What can we do? Our legs have gone to jelly. What do we do?
Really upset
It was just, we have upset them. Emlyn News was going round fuming. Phil Thompson was waving his fists at everybody. It was a scary moment, But
any music that stood out for you whilst your playing career?
no, not really. I'm not a music fan. I like listening to music. I like the radio on in the car. I like watching the music on TV, and I don't follow bands. I mean, the only band I ever follow was the Beatles. So that's how far we're going back. So no music stands out. Nielsen, remember Nielsen made a song, Without You? Nielsen. Gabby won't remember. He's far too young. Yes, Nielsen made a song, and that was my favourite song of the time. Yeah, it was called Without You. Fantastic.
Away from the game, Joe, what did you used to do in the 70s?
Early 70s, well, I went into Diggs, as I said, in 1970, and I was in Diggs with Gary Emanuel. What we used to do quite often, because we did have lots of money, we were only earning £3 a week, so we'd go to the cinema. So all I wanted to do when I came down from Liverpool was to be a professional footballer, and nothing would have stood in my way. I would have battled and fought and kicked and done anything possibly for me to be a professional footballer. So everything was revolved around me being better, making myself a bit quicker, a bit stronger, a bit taller, good at football, keeping fit. Everything was revolved about me being a professional footballer. So cinema was probably films. I'm still like me films now. So the cinema was my time. I'd spend a lot of time there now, but they're too darn expensive nowadays, aren't they?
I mean, everything is Joe, anything. Richard Barker says, played for Atherstone United youth team when Joe was the first team manager. I met him once at a team talk before a local derby with Tamworth. We were shocking that night, and at half time he steamed into us.
Right.
Elaborate, Joe.
Steamed into you. Well, sorry, what was the score at half time?
I'm guessing you were getting beat, Joe. At half time.
This half time.
Yeah.
What's the chappie's name again?
Richard Barker.
Richard Barker. Okay.
Yeah,
I must admit, I don't really remember. Sorry, Richard, but
He
anyway,
does apologise.
it's they've obviously played for me to steam in at them. There was nobody more ferocious in a half time or full time sort of than Jim Smith, and I probably took a bit of that inside of me. Went in, let the lads know that, hey, you're still in this game. You've got to fight more. You've got to battle more. You don't want to be shying out the game, or you've got to stand up. You've got the supporters here watching the game, and it was just a case of whatever it is. I can't really remember the game. If I've steamed in at them, as Richard says, then they've deserved it. The first half performance deserved it. It would be interesting to know how we did get on at the end of the game, after whether it was double the result or we pulled it back a little bit.
So, Richard, we need the result. we need what happened result in the second half. Yeah. How bad was the Bald Eagle? What was the worst he was at half-time to? In what game?
Okay, if I can tell you very quickly. The first game Jim took over, I think it was the first game Jim took over, we trained at St Andrews on the pitch, and then we went up to Newcastle St James's Park, and if memory serves me right, which is probably off a little bit, but if memory serves me right, we were winning the game, and then we drew the game through a silly goal. I think a silly goal. It ended up being 1-1. So to win at St James's Park was like going to Anfield. Very hard. So I think we drew the game, and we came in at half time. We came in at full time, sorry, and Jim Smith's first game, and at Newcastle, the way it was at the time, they were like lockers. So you put your clothes, your trousers, your shirts, and that in these lockers. So we've come in at full time, and in the middle of the dressing room, as you can imagine, a dressing room, it has like a physiotherapy bed in there for anybody who's having a rub down or injured or whatever. And there was these cups, there was the cups that we have for full time, cup of tea. And we came in, and Jim, this is our first time of, apart from on the training ground the day before, at St Andrews the day before, our first sort of after game. He slammed the door, and with these cups, he just swiped his hand across the physio table to smash all these cups up against these lockers. So if you can imagine, sort of 14, 15 cups, putting your hand down and just swiping them right off the thing. He done that when he done that, we all just were in shock. We must have all just been, what's he doing? We've never seen any, and even since, I've never seen anything like that. And he just lambasted everybody. He just hammered us. He effed and beat for about 15 minutes, and we was just stuck. We was just frozen. We just couldn't believe how angry a man could get. How violent it was! Violent, swiping 15 cups, smashing them up against the wall, and then just absolutely hammering. And I'm thinking to myself, well, it's a football match, you know. It's a football match. Jim obviously was setting his tone out as to what he's going to be like as a manager. And it really done the job. I think after that, we went on a run of about 6 or 7 games without getting beat or something like that. But that was unbelievable. I've never seen, and I never seen him get any more angrier after that. Apart from the couple of times he grabbed Mark Dennis by the collars up in the dressing room, and screaming and shouting and things like that. Yeah.
Hold on, Richard Barker, we were 4 down at half time, so you were right, Joe. Right. I mean, 4-0 down at half time. I remember the night, ended up losing 4-2, so you done the job. Right, they won the second half 2-0. Yeah, I'm sure we were 3 down in 15 minutes. To be fair, my old man was even worse when he got out after half time. So you weren't as bad as his dad. Yeah. It was a constructive telling off, if that makes any sense. And a well-deserved one. So you were absolutely right, Joe.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you.
Yeah. Does Richard still play?
Yeah.
So imagine Jim Smith. Being in there 4-0 down at half time. Yes. There wouldn't have just been the cups gone, the urn would have gone over as well, wouldn't it? Yeah. So what was he like? He obviously mellowed a little bit.
Yes.
For me, Jim's probably my favourite Birmingham City manager of all time.
Yes, he was with me. Was with me. I'm not embarrassed to say he was with me. Regarding my best manager ever, it is Jim Smith and John Lyle. Yeah. And I must put John Lyle in there, because he was a fantastic man and a fantastic manager, and Jim was a fantastic man and a fantastic manager. Very, very. I wanted to take out onto the pitch a part of Jim Smith, because I knew how demanding he was from a performance, and how passionate he was to the game, and how you needed pride in your performance. And so I always would think of Jim Smith whenever I would go out onto the pitch and fight and work and battle as much as I know Jim Smith would want me to. Yeah.
Now, I'm guessing he was a completely different character to Alf and also to Willie Bell, who took charge a couple of years after Freddie was sacked.
Yes.
And Freddie Goodwin, I would imagine Freddie was quite a gentleman.
Yes. Well, all four of them were gentlemen. Yeah. For us, shall we use the word? Well, using the word violent is a bit too strong, but for as fiery as Jim was, he was such a quiet gentleman. Yeah. He was a quiet gentleman, knew the game inside out, and he knew what a player could do. He knew what Mark Dennis could do. Yeah. He knew what Kevin Dillon could do, and that's why he got so frustrated with them two lads. They were both class acts. They were both very, very good football players, but Jim would fire into them more than any of the other lads because Jim knew that they could do it, and Jim was absolutely right, and they have admitted with me to me that Jim was right. Jim knew that they had something extra that they could do, and that's what Jim was. But your Willie Bells and your Sir Alf Ramseys and your John Lyles, you know, they weren't pussycats. They were fiery. They would scream and shout when it needed to be, absolutely when it needed to be. But they were, is the word compassionate? You know, they understood. They understood, like Jim did, you know, what they've got going against them and things like that, or whether they're not quite fit enough, or whether they're carrying an injury and things like that. But they were all very, very good managers in their own right.
Now, I remember also as well, we played Villa in Jimmy Dugdale's testimonial at Villa Park. I don't know if you... Jim Smith... Don't think Jim had been there that long, if memory serves me right. But when you're looking back over 30-odd years, I remember he got a black glove on at the time, and he'd scored a goal or something against the Villa and stuck his two fingers up. And I don't think I was dreaming about that situation. But he was of that evolution, wasn't he? You know, Jim Smith
very passionate, passionate. Yeah.
Also, you know, he was known as the Bald Eagle. But did any of you players call him that, or did you just call him Boss?
Never.
Did you ever think about calling him?
No. He was the boss. I would call him the boss.
Yeah.
Whereas when I went up to West Ham, John Lyle wanted all the players to call him John.
Got ya. Yeah.
Jim Smith wanted to be called boss, so he was boss.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't call John Lyle boss.
Yeah.
It was
just
all John,
yeah.
Which was a little bit hard for us, because if you wanted to have a word with him, or you wanted a favour off him or something, you couldn't knock his door and say, John, blah, 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 blah. It'd be, boss, can I have a quick word with you? Yeah. Occasionally, one or two players, Billy Bonds, Trevor Brookin, Ray Stewart, Alvin Mott, occasionally the slip of the tongue would call him boss, you know, but he always wanted you to call him John, because it was a level playing field. That's the way John wanted a discussion, or in a team meeting, he'd want it as John this or John that. But,
now, Jim Smith did have a really bad hand, didn't he? Because he was the one that ultimately had to sell Trevor. To sell your greatest asset that arguably Birmingham City have ever had.
Yeah.
And I suppose you could argue that, what was it, 1979 that Trevor went in the February?
Something like that,
We've never really replaced him. But then again, how do you replace a player like Trevor Francis? Now, he was going to replace him with Brian Little.
Right.
And Brian Little was primed. He did go over to Portugal and met Jim in a bar.
Yes.
And it was only the fact that Brian failed a medical that he didn't sign for Birmingham City.
Yes.
He brought in Frank, he
Yes.
brought in Archie, and he brought in Colin.
Yes.
Three great players to replace Trevor.
Yeah. Yes, Brian, we remember the time of Brian Little reading the papers and hearing on the news that he could possibly come to Birmingham, but I think it all fell through.
Yeah,
with
did on the medical.
With the trip, he went to Portugal, which I don't think the board of directors were very happy with him going over, because Jim was on holiday in Portugal, and the board of directors, I believe, was saying, I've read, was saying, whether it's true or not, that you could have waited till you got back off your holiday, and then you could have had a chat with him. So, but Jim wanted him to be flown out. Yeah. I can see Jim's point of view. He wants him to sign on the dotted line as soon as possible. So, yeah, but he was a quality player, Brian Little. Yeah, very, very good. Yeah. Good days.
Now, days did sour towards the end, because ultimately you were sold. They didn't sour in terms of you with your manager, but Jim was forced to sell you to Wolverhampton Wanderers.
Yes.
And coming the other way in the deal was John Richards, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Talk me through them days, Joe.
Okay, yeah.
Because let me just before, what you see in the press, what you read, what you hear in the press, rarely is the truth. What the player tells you is the truth.
Yes, well,
and then you get it in the neck when you want to leave, and it ain't you that wants to leave.
Yeah.
So you pick up the story.
Yeah. The Jim Smith called me into the office at Elmdon Training Ground one day and said, Wolverhampton want you to sign for them. And I just was shocked, but I just said, oh, right, okay. And he said, be at the Holiday Inn. I don't know whether this was the week of before the start of the season. So this might have been the Tuesday. Jim said there's a meeting. Yes, he said there's a meeting. We're going to have a meeting tonight or tomorrow night. We're going to have a meeting on the Wednesday night, tomorrow night, at the Holiday Inn in Birmingham. He said, what they want to do, he said, Jim said, we want to do a swap deal, you for John Richards. And I said, okay. So the next day, me and Jim Smith met John Barnwell and John Richards at the Holiday Inn the next night. This is the Wednesday before the start of the season. And the Holiday Inn at that time, there was a swimming pool, so me and John Barnwell sat on one desk, one end of the swimming pool, and John Richards and Jim Smith sat and chatted the other side. Yeah. And John Barnwell said, like, I want you at Birmingham. I want you at the Molineux. He said, I don't care how the negotiations go. He said, I'm not interested in what their negotiations go. He said, but we want you at the Molineux for this Saturday coming at home against Liverpool. And I says, okay. And then he said, what do you want? And I told him my terms of what I wanted, not thinking that they would be accepted. But when I told him, he says, right, you can have them terms. Be at my office tomorrow morning at the Molineux, 9 o'clock. I said, fine. So we stood up and left, went. How their negotiations went, I really don't know. The next day, I got out the car outside the Molineux and was walking towards the big glass doors to go inside the football ground. Just with that, John Richards was opposite me, and he came out of this office door. He came out of this door, and John mimoed to me, whispering. I had to sort of read his lips, but he was saying, don't sign. And I was like looking with my eyes squinted, thinking, what's he saying? And he's saying, don't sign. And I presumed, later on I'd thought about it, that I realised what he was saying, and he was saying don't sign. So I knew Jim was at the football club down in one of the other rooms where John Richards was walking then. So I've gone into the office where John Richards has just come out of, and it was John Barnwell's office. So as I went in, John Barnwell says, "Yeah, Joe, this is the contract," and he went through it very quickly with me. Took 2 minutes to go through because we'd already sorted the negotiations out. And then John Barnwell passed me the pen. I got the pen in my hand and I just stopped and I thought, I'm going to try and speak to the manager, the boss. So I said to him, I held hold of the pen and I said, "Do you mind if I go and have a quick word with the boss?" And John Barnwell said, "Yeah, fine, go on, you go and have a word with him." I put the pen down, I walked down the corridor, went into this room because I knew where Jim Smith was, because I'd seen some press people sort of outside. So I went in this room and there was just Jim. Jim was inside this office. I closed the door behind me and I said, "Boss, I don't want to come here." I said, "I want to stay at Birmingham." And I had it was about 2.5 years left of a contract still to run. So I was not wanting to come to Wolverhampton. I wanted to stay at Birmingham, and I was saying to the manager, I said to the manager, "I don't want to come here, I want to stay at Birmingham." And he said, "Joe, we need John Richards, you've got to come here." And when he said that, I thought, well, okay. So I went back up to the office, got the pen off John Barnwell, and I signed. And that's and I'd over the next few weeks, I'd been thinking about what John Richards was saying, and John Richards wanted our deal to fall through, presumably fall through, because it would have strengthened his. John Richards was due a testimonial or something, and his terms with Jim Smith didn't work out, and so John Richards eventually stayed at Wolverhampton as well. And that's the reason how and why I signed for Wolverhampton Wanderers.
But you must have been due a testimonial at Birmingham, because you were there almost 10 or over 10 years,
11 years, 11 years. Yeah, well, I don't know how many months previous, but I'd had a testimonial.
Oh, right, okay.
I'd had a testimonial.
Oh, right.
After 10 years, I had a testimonial at Birmingham. So, and John was due a testimonial because he'd just done 10 years. He was due it. So, presumably, he wanted
to stay and get the testimonial, rather.
Get the testimonial, or have Birmingham City fund his movement across.
Oh, so you had your testimonial, then after that, you've still got a couple of years, 2.5 years left on. But again, when the club want to sell you, as much as you might want to stay,
the story behind the Birmingham never had a centre forward. They just sold Keith Birchin to Norwich. I think it was Norwich. But Keith Birchin had gone to Norwich, so Birmingham never had a striker. But what Birmingham did have was a young centre-half called Pat Vandenhauer.
Yeah,
he was a very, very good young player. So Birmingham had a centre-half, so they had two centre-halves, me and Pat Vandenhauer, but they got no centre-forward. Great, we'll sell Joe to Wolverhampton and we'll have John Richards, which would have worked out, the way Jim probably wanted it to work out. But for whatever reason, on their side, I don't know what happened on that. John eventually stayed at Wolverhampton.
But your time at Wolverhampton wasn't particularly very successful.
No.
And then how long was it into? It was a pre-season, wasn't it, if memory serves me right? The Wolves players were due to do a photo shoot.
Yes. Yeah.
And you take up the story.
Okay. I carried on living in Birmingham, of course, and the training ground was under decoration, under refit. Yeah. So we had to train at Wolverhampton at the Molineux. Yeah. So when I arrived, I was never ever late for training. Never ever late for training at all. When I arrived, I opened the dressing room door, and all the lads, all the first team squad, were sitting in their clothes around the dressing room.
Yeah.
And I went in, and they were all sitting silent, and I thought, that's a bit strange. And I said, well, I was still standing at the door. I'd gone through the door. I said, what's the matter? And Andy Gray said, oh, they want us to do this photo. They want us to do a photo advertisement, new sponsors. So, and then I at the time, I wasn't in the first team at the time. Yeah. So all this, what did come out was, it was nothing to do with me, because I wasn't in the first team.
Even meant to be.
I wasn't even, yeah. So, but we were training. It was training day. So, so when that was said to me, that they want to put this, they've got to put this shirt on with the logo of this company for the company. Obviously, the company would put some funds into the football club. Yeah. And with them still sitting, so I said, while I was still standing, I said, well, why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you getting changed? And I really don't know who it was, but one of the lads, maybe John Richards, Kenny Ibbett, it wouldn't have been Derek Park, and it wouldn't have been Phil Parks, because there was a Phil Parks there, not the Phil Parks that was at West Ham.
Yeah, it was one of Wolves.
Yeah. Well. So one of them said, oh, no, we want something off the football club to, And I said, well, so by this time I've gone and I've sat down. So I'm sitting with them, and I've said, well, what do you want then? What do you? And I'm talking to them as a whole. What do you want? And I'm just sitting with them next to Kenny Ibbett and Peter Daniels. And I said, well, what do you want? And then they said, oh, well, we just want a little token of something. It was a camera company. Yeah. We want a little token of something. So I said, well, hasn't somebody been in to tell them? And they went, no, nobody's been and gone. So within a few, so I just sat with them. So I've gone into this, shall we call it a revolt, or they were all just sitting down. And they're not doing nothing, they're just sitting waiting. Anyway, Derek Dugan, who was the manager at the time, and I loved playing against Derek Dugan. I loved listening to Derek Dugan, because he was the chief of the PFA. He was top man, a great speaker, and I really liked Derek Dugan. Derek Dugan came in, and he's gone round verbally having a go at each player. So Paul Bradshaw, he had a go at Paul Bradshaw. He said something about goalkeeping, and you've been playing rubbish the last few weeks. He hammered him anyway. Jeff Palmer, he hammered. Derek Parkin, he hammered. Now Derek Parkin had been there like sort of
forever,
15 years, and he'd had a go at Derek Parkin. Then he had a go at Peter Daniels. He come to me, never said nothing. He went right past me. He hammered Kenny Ibbett. He hammered John Richards. He hammered Andy Gray. He hammered Wayne Clark, who only had about 2 games or something. He just verbally. Oh, Willie Carr.
Legend.
He hammered Willie Carr. He was a great speaker.
Yeah, Dugan was.
He just hammered every one of them, and he said, so I'm gonna leave it with you. This football club needs the funds from this company, so you've got to put this kit on, and you've got to go out and get this photograph done. He said, so you've got to do it. So he left the room, and I'm looking round at all the lads. And then they're all thinking. I could see them all thinking. They were all just with the tail between their legs thinking. And then all of a sudden, one got up, and I think the first one was Andy, stood up to start taking his clothes off to get his this kit on, this old gold kit with the logo of the team on. When one done it, and as you know, another one will follow, then another one, and I went. I know it's silly of me, and I shouldn't really have done nothing. I should have just kept quiet. And I said, lads, you've said your piece. You've said what you want. You've told them. They've gone away. Let them decide. They'll be back in, and they'll tell you what's going to happen. And Andy and John Richards and Willie Carr, they just went, oh, we're going to do it, we better do it. So they put the kit on and they went out onto the pitch and had this photograph taken. Silly me stayed in the dressing room. I stayed in the dressing room. I didn't go outside. They were only outside for 15 minutes, had this photograph taken, come back in, and then they started taking the old gold kit off and putting the training kit on. Yeah. I was already in my training kit. So then we've gone out to do a training session out the side of the pitch, done a training session, come back in, got showered, changed, went home. Next day, back into the same dressing room, and Jim Barron, the coach who I was talking to at Birmingham City only last week, fortnight ago, Jim Barron pokes his head through the front door and he says, Joe, Peter was the secretary, I can't remember Peter's surname, but he says, Peter, Joe, Peter wants to have a quick word with you. And I went, yeah, fine. So I went in, I poked my head through the secretary's office and I said, Peter, you want to have a word with me? He said, oh yeah, Joe. He said, here, this is yours. And he passed me a letter and I walked up to the desk, got this letter off him, and it was about 4 lines, that's all it was, a line of 4 lines, and it said something like, because you haven't appeared on an official photograph, the club, we're going to terminate your contract, or words to that effect. And I said to Peter, I said, what does this mean? And he said, you've been sacked. I went, what? He said, you've been sacked. He said, oh, and they're yours over there. And he pointed behind me again to a bag. So I said, what's this? I went and opened this bag and it was me boots, my training boots. And and I said, what's all this? He said, Joe, you've got to leave the premises straight away. And thankfully, they didn't get a security guard like to throw me off the premises. But that was it. And I had to leave, got in my car and drove home. And that's how I got the sack from Wolverhampton Football Club.
It's madness, isn't it? I mean, that wouldn't happen today.
Well, I certainly wouldn't do it today. No chance, because I was earning £500 a week, and I still had about 2 years left of a contract.
So didn't they pay you nothing, Joe? Just a sack? That's it?
That's it, yeah, that's it.
So what happened then?
About 3 days later, why it took 3 days, I don't really know. Well, it was about 3 days later, I got a phone call off Gordon Taylor, and Gordon said, Joe, I've heard you've had a bit of trouble at Wolverhampton. I said, yeah. And I played with Gordon at Birmingham, you see. And I speak very highly of Gordon. Gordon said, Joe, I heard you've had some trouble at Wolverhampton Wanderers. What's happened? And I told him very quickly what it was about. I said I didn't do this photograph, which was nothing to do with me, but under the circumstances, I've been sacked. And Gordon did say, in great respect of Gordon, Gordon said, do you want me to get you back to the football club? And silly me said, no. I said no. So because of me going under them circumstances, having been sacked, I didn't want to go back.
I'll have my compensation, but I ain't going back to play for him. Kind of thing. Yeah. So that's my that was my story of going to leaving Birmingham City and joining Wolverhampton Wanderers. So how long was it then until you got the call from John
Lyle? Yeah, it was. See, when footballers, and I'm sure there's 1 or 2 players listening to this now, but when you're playing football, you think you can play forever, which you do, and you think you're going to go on forever.
What age was you at the time, Joe? About?
I was 20, about 28.
So you're in the prime of your career.
About 28. Yeah, and I thought somebody will phone me up, somebody will come and take me. As I didn't want to go to Wolverhampton, I wasn't on a contract with anyone. I just thought that the phone will ring and I'll go somewhere. You know, I did think, and players think like that. They think, oh yes, somebody will phone me up, somebody will phone me up. And then one day when the phone rung, it was a Sunday evening at 6:30ish. I answered the phone. Hello, Joe. This is John Lyle. And I said, yeah, come on. Who is it? Thinking it was one of the lads winding me up. He said, no, it's John Lyle. It's John Lyle. He said, I've heard you've had a bit of trouble at Wolverhampton. I'd like to come up and have a few words with you and have you come down to West Ham. And I said, yeah, fantastic. I said, please, you know, and he asked me my address. I told him, and within 2 hours, him and Eddie Bailey were on my doorstep. Eddie Bailey was the chief scout who'd been a big name for Tottenham Hotspur. So he was very experienced. They were both at my doorstep. And John, we went through a few things. West Ham had, this was on a Sunday, West Ham had played at Villa Park on the Saturday, and Ray Stewart had just got sent off at Villa Park. Billy Bonds had a broken foot, and Ray Stewart was suspended. So the right back, Ray Stewart, was suspended.
You mean Frank Lampard?
Yeah.
One of them got sent off.
The dad. Yeah. Sorry. Ray Stewart was suspended.
Yeah.
No, there was only Frank Lampard who was available. Yeah. They only had one player out of the back four,
so they got three
available. Ray Stewart was out, Alvin Martin was out, and Billy Bonds had a broken foot. So they only had one person, which was Frank Lampard, in the back four. So would I like to? And I said, yeah, of course I would, yeah. And he said, there's just one little problem. And I thought to myself, oh, here's my luck again. Here's my luck. I said, what is it? He said, you've got to come with us now. He said, we need you now. He said, we've got a game Tuesday night at Notts County in the League Cup. I said, give me 5 minutes. I raced upstairs, threw some stuff in a bag. And had great times down at West Ham.
And you enjoyed it, and you enjoyed the training. I remember you saying the best training you've ever had in your career.
Yeah, something different.
How was it different to other training that you had at Birmingham and Wolves?
At Wolverhampton and Birmingham, there's many times where you do the same thing again. It wasn't as if I was bored with anything. It wasn't. It was always good stuff, exciting stuff. But John Lyle took the training every day, and he'd done something different every day. We'd have a different. It was all altered differently. It was new to the brain all the time. Something different. Thoroughly enjoyable. And he had good coaching staff with him. Mick. Somebody. I can't remember. And Ronnie Boyce. You remember Ronnie Boyce? He played for. Did he play for Chelsea as well?
I've got no idea. He certainly played for West Ham, didn't he? Boyce. Phil Parks was a goalkeeper. So good days, and that's how I ended up at West Ham. And then you went to Burnley with John Bond.
Burnley, yeah.
John you finished your career there.
John Lyle called me into the office one day, and at West Ham I was signing a month-to-month contract. Then at the end of the season, John Lyle called me in and he had me sign a full 1 year's contract, which was fantastic because then I could move my wife down to London and my children down to London because I was living in a hotel, you see. So John, one day, so I was on this 1 year contract at West Ham. Then after a few weeks of pre-season training, John Lyle calls me into the office and he said, John Bond wants you up at Burnley. And I really didn't even know what division Burnley were in. I says, what division is Burnley in? He says, well, they're in the 3rd division. He says, but they've just gone down. There's every chance that they'll come back into the 2nd division. So he said, what I would do, he said to me, because by this time now, Alvin was back, Ray Stewart was back, Frank was already there, Billy Bonds was back, he had his own squad. He said, we'll keep you here if you want. He said, but go and have a word with him. He said, at the moment, he said, you're 28 now. He said, you need a little bit of security. He said, if you go and speak to John, and John will maybe give you a longer contract, have a word with him. He said, when you've had a word with him, phone me up.
Yeah.
So it might have been maybe the next day. I went up to Burnley, spoke to John Bond, and the result of it was I signed a 4-year contract at West Ham. I was on like £500 a week. At Burnley, they were in the 3rd division. I was on a 4-year contract, but it was £300 a week. So big money, big
massive
money,
drop,
massive.
but a better contract.
Well, yeah. So it was so security. I had 4 years left there. So then me and my wife and my children could move up to Burnley, and you know that was my next football club. So Burnley was a great football club. Yeah. Great supporters. The town is so small, they live.
They love the football.
Like Liverpool people, they love the football. So it was a great football club. Yeah. If
you could have a 1-to-1 with anyone dead and alive, who would it be with?
Oh, golly. I don't know, but a clue would be the greatest player I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Was Pele. And Pele to me, your Maradonas, your Trevor Francises, your Cristiano Ronaldo, Messi now can come nowhere near Pele. Pele was I'll never ever see anybody. But yeah, so somebody like Pele, so it's like that.
Highest high, lowest low during your career?
The lowest was probably the semi-final in 1975.
Yeah.
That's the lowest. That was a big like blow to the stomach.
Yeah.
Especially under the circumstances of us leaving, where that ball just trickled over the line. Mitchell, and then we went back, we kicked off, and the whistle went.
Yeah.
So hurting was that, but just a little bit angry with myself for not being able to put myself into them positions more often. You know,
it was quite a long ball, wasn't it?
No, sorry, I didn't mean positions.
Right,
I'm sorry.
Say,
no,
because John, you did meet John again.
I
Did you
did
remember the return?
Yes,
and he did say, Joe, I thought he was a bit quiet. Bit slow.
I meant I wish I'd have reached more semi-finals or close to the league championship and things like that.
And we should have really, with the team that we had in the 70s at Birmingham, shouldn't we?
Yeah. Well, the John incident, the John Mitchell incident was quite funny actually. We were doing
Return the Penguin.
A function at here in Birmingham, and there was a group of Birmingham City players, and 4 or 5 of us, and unbeknownst to me in the audience was John Mitchell, and John. And this was all a bit of a setup, I think. Because
I set it up.
Oh, did you? Was it you? Right, okay. Well, I didn't even know. Was sat near the back, and the course of the evening, these questions I would be answering to people about the semi-final and things like that. And I was saying, well, ball came over here, and this happened, and that happened, and this happened, and that happened, and then I get this hand up at the back, and this voice saying, and I couldn't see properly the person. I didn't recognise properly the person.
Shall I tell you what happened that night? Mitchell, right, I used to live in Cook's Lane. I'd give him the directions to get to my house on Cook's Lane. Mitchell got lost. He ended up at the Belfry. And I've said, John, how the bloody hell did you get there? He said, I don't know. He said, well, how do I get back? It was at the E57 Club in Kingsheath. So I gave him directions, and I was to meet him at the venue. I was going to take him in my black cab. So we were running late. I got there and asked you the question, and you've says, Gabby, I've already gone through but being it's you, I'll answer it again.
Oh, right, yeah.
And as you was going through the ball, I gave Mitchell the microphone, and this London voice said, "Joe, I thought you was a bit slow that night," and you nearly fell over. I thought he was going to chew.
Yes, because the questions were, and then when the question came from yourself, which I didn't recognise, I thought to myself, well, I've already answered that question. Then I says, well, I'll go through it again. And then when John and then when you went, Joe, this is John Mitchell, I could have fallen down. Down. It was a fantastic, setup. It worked. If it was a setup to catch me, it really did, absolutely, 100%.
It worked almost as good as Howard's free kick.
Against
Liverpool.
It was good.
But again, great times. So that was your lowest low. What was your highest high?
It has to be, because there wasn't many highs. Yeah. There wasn't many highs. I admit. Signing for Birmingham, coming to Birmingham. I'm here in Birmingham now. I've been here since 1970. I go backwards and forwards every couple of weeks, every couple of months to see my family in Liverpool. So coming to Birmingham was just... It changed my life, absolutely changed my life. I go back to Liverpool quite often, very often nowadays, to see my mum, who's in the Alzheimer's home. My dad passed away 10 years ago. I still have 4 sisters and 2 brothers, so we're still quite a large family. And I just thank God that I made a living for myself here in Birmingham. Yeah. And although I'm born and bred in Liverpool, I class Birmingham is my hometown. Birmingham is my hometown. I love Liverpool. I love going back there to see my family and old friends that I was schoolmates with. But Birmingham City, the city of Birmingham, the people of Birmingham are world class, absolutely world class. I've got 2 children of my own. I've got 3 grandchildren now, and I will always remain here in Birmingham.
Well, we're absolutely delighted, Joe, that you took that journey at the age of 15 and become one of our most famous adopted sons.
Yes, it's been fantastic. Birmingham City Football Club was a fantastic football club. Yeah. Birmingham, lots of people say to me, especially when I'm up in Liverpool, they say, why didn't you sign for Everton, or why didn't you sign for Liverpool? And the truthful answer is, because Birmingham asked me first. They were the first ones to ask me. And that following week, I had Tony Waiters, who was the old who was the old Liverpool goalkeeper, an England goalkeeper. He was the chief scout of Liverpool, and he was banging on my mum and dad's door many times saying, Bill Shankly wants Joe at Anfield, Bill Shankly wants Joe at Anfield. And they were saying, he's already promised Birmingham, he's going to go to Birmingham. And I don't regret what one part of it.
I wonder if, with Bill Shankly wants Joe at Anfield, his nephew said, you ain't. Because Roger Hind was Bill Shankly.
Yes, I heard. Nephew. Yes, I heard about it.
So whether that ran the dinner table there, old Garth told his uncle that Joe's staying and he's the protege. So who knows what goes on round family dinner tables. Yeah. But Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure, sir. And that was my 90s, my 70s with Mr. Joe Gallagher.
Thank you.
Cheers,
Thank you
Joe.
very much. My pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers, pal.
As we journey on, how your heart may yearn for the things most dear to you.